It's official. Donald Trump has ordered the National Guard to enter Washington, D.C. to quell what he calls major unrest and violence. Now, folks, here's the thing. I've lived in Washington, D.C. for over 8 years. The crime in this city is no better nor no worse than I've ever seen it. Donald Trump is doing this for one reason and one reason only, and that's to distract the American public from the fact that his administration has yet to release the Epstein files. So today, Donald Trump made the announcement that National Guardsmen will enter Washington, D.C. There will be hundreds, potentially up to 1,000 members of the Washington, D.C. National Guard mobilized at areas throughout the city to target crime. But latest statistics show that year over year, violent crime is actually down in Washington, D.C. now compared to the same time last year. And Mayor Bowser, the mayor of Washington, D.C., has on multiple occasions said that Donald Trump's efforts to mobilize the National Guard are simply unfounded, that the city is not a war zone, that Stephen Miller's comparison of Washington, D.C. to Baghdad, Iraq, is completely baseless, and I tend to agree. As someone who lives here, I will be the first to tell you that this city is no more or less dangerous than any other big city across America or across the world. So here's the thing. Donald Trump has the power as president of the United States to federalize or take over the Washington, D.C. police force, to essentially mobilize the National Guard, which is what he's doing today. He does not have the power to completely eliminate a concept called home rule. Home rule is the DC's ability to govern itself. Essentially, DC has a legislative branch in the DC City Council, an executive in the mayor, and a judiciary in courts. Essentially, DC has its own court system. DC has the power to completely govern itself. It's an autonomous area, even though it is not an official state. Donald Trump cannot eliminate that ability to govern itself. But what Donald Trump can do is he can take over the police force. Before I continue, I will be covering this wall-to-wall, on-the-ground live for you from Washington, D.C., so please consider subscribing to support my work by clicking the button below or sending a one-time donation via Venmo to Aaron-Parnas. Now, here's what this means. National Guard on the ground in Washington, D.C., up to 1,000, will create a warlike mentality in the city. DC is about 67, 68 square miles. It is not a huge area by any means. And most of the National Guard will actually likely not go to most parts of DC because there are a ton of parts of DC where crime is really non-existent. Where the National Guard will likely focus is in the southeast and southwest regions of DC, where crime is more prevalent according to statistics and based on what the administration is essentially saying. Now, the National Guard, there will be several hundred up to 1,000. They're going to patrol the city and potentially conduct law enforcement activities or support law enforcement in some type of way. I believe, and I have to go conduct some more research into this, the National Guard itself cannot conduct arrests, but can support local law enforcement in conducting arrests, unless Donald Trump invokes the Insurrection Act and then all hands are off. Remember, he tried to do something similar in Los Angeles. They didn't need the National Guard. The National Guard has since been sent back. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is also planning to temporarily reassign about 120 FBI agents from the Washington field office to conduct nighttime patrol duties throughout the city to try to crack down on street crime. Donald Trump is saying that he is, quote, liberating the city, that today is Liberation Day. He said that DC will be, quote, liberated today. Crime, savagery, filth, and scum will disappear. I will make our capital great again. Meanwhile, Mayor Bowser has cited that despite Trump's claim that violent crime is spiking, 26% drop in violent crime overall, a 7% overall crime decrease in 2025, 30-year low in Washington, D.C. So that's kind of the latest there. This is a serious escalation. We're obviously going to be monitoring. I will be monitoring very closely to see what happens next. We obviously don't know what will happen next. He just made this announcement. And then ultimately we're going to have news throughout the day where I will be on the ground. I may actually go to the White House or to various parts of Washington, D.C., depending on the timing of the deployment. So we're going to see. But D.C. is turning into the next Los Angeles for Donald Trump. This is another attempt to distract from the Epstein files. That is ultimately what Donald Trump does not want you or the public talking about. And speaking about the Epstein files, we got some big news this morning. A federal judge in New York denied Donald Trump and the federal government's request to release Epstein-related grand jury materials in the Ghislaine Maxwell case. This is what the Trump administration had been long hoping for. They wanted Judge Engelmeyer in the Southern District of New York to release the Epstein files, but he has refused. He said no. And the reason he said no, partly, is because all of the materials that he reviewed in the grand jury records that could be released publicly, well, the information's already public. It's almost like what we've been saying for a long time, that there is nothing in these grand jury materials that could be publicly released that we don't already know about. But there are thousands of pages of Epstein-related files that the Department of Justice has in its possession that it could release to the public, that it has refused to release to the public to date. So the calls to release the Epstein files are only going to grow, especially as Congress remains intent on subpoenaing the files from the Department of Justice. So we'll see what happens there. Meanwhile, under the Trump administration, we're now learning that the Department of Veterans Affairs has lost thousands of, quote, mission-critical healthcare staff, including nurses, doctors, and other providers, worsening already severe shortages, prompting unsafe care conditions, fueling union and veteran fears of privatization, and coinciding with policy shifts toward private healthcare funding, union contract terminations, and prolonged patient wait times, despite VA claims of minimal impact. According to The Guardian, in Vietnam, thousands of farmers are set to lose their land to a $1.5 billion Trump organization-backed golf resort and have reportedly been offered compensation as low as $12 per square meter plus rice, prompting fears over lost livelihoods despite government promises of reimbursement, job creation, and economic benefits from the luxury development. Las Vegas tourism dropped sharply in June 2025. Overall visits are down 11.3%. International visitors are down 13%, with Nevada's largest labor union and hospitality workers citing the Trump administration's aggressive immigration policies due to the significant drop in tourism. Interestingly, NVIDIA and AMD will give the United States government 15% of revenue from sales of advanced H20 AI chips to China, following the Trump administration's earlier halt on such sales in April and subsequent approval to resume shipments under new Commerce Department licensing. Ahead of the August 15th Trump-Putin summit in Alaska, Poland's prime minister expressed both fear and hope, noting that Washington's pledge to consult European partners, while European leaders welcomed U.S. efforts toward peace, but stressed maintaining pressure on Moscow and securing guarantees for Kyiv. At the United Nations Security Council, the U.S. defended Israel, accused some nations of actively prolonging the war by spreading lies, and affirmed Israel's right to determine security measures against Hamas. The U.S. and China have yet to extend their tariff truce, with tensions rising as the deadline nears, though July talks in Stockholm concluded with both sides aiming for a 90-day extension. Colombian senator and presidential hopeful Miguel Uribe, who's 39 years old, died after being shot in the head at a June 7th campaign rally in Bogota. And finally, a federal judge in Hawaii ruled that commercial fishing is illegal in the Pacific Islands Heritage Marine National Monument, a protected area in the Central Pacific. That is all the news right now. We're going to be covering what's happening in Washington, D.C. throughout the day, so stay tuned, bear with me, subscribe to support, and I'll see you soon. Hey folks, Aaron Parnas here. Thank you so much for watching The Parnas Perspective. Please consider subscribing to support our work as we grow this independent news media entity into something that rivals mainstream every single day. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon.